everybody to She Leads. My name is Sarah Wu, here with Anima Viva, and today we are hosting Isabelle Gold, who is a transformational facilitator. In our She Leads programming and conversations and musings and talks and all the things that we're getting to share here is we're trying to highlight women in leadership, women empowered, not necessarily women in power, because we don't want to consider things like power over dynamics. A lot of what we're doing here with She Leads is to consider a more holistic approach to what it means to be empowered, what it means to be a voice in our communities, and just what it looks like to start to pick apart and, unravel all of the harm that's been caused for many millennia here on planet Earth. And particularly right now, at this moment in history, we are seeing a lot of things just that used to be kind of covert, that used to be, reserved for other spaces, just so blatantly in our faces. And we're definitely in a place in the world right now where we're trying to figure out, who we are and how do we retell story and how do we, move forward as a species, interrelating with countless other species and life systems here on planet Earth. So I'm welcoming Isabella today to talk about life as a ceremony and how to cultivate the sacred in every day. And I feel like this is so important, especially as we start to pull apart the power over systems that try to tell us that the sacred only lies in a few people, or that there's intercessors between us and the sacred, and that we don't have a direct relationship with God or goddess or spirit or however you call it. And so, Isabelle, I'd love to just give you the floor to share a little bit about what it means to you to be in this time right now in human history, and to walk the path of the sacred and to take the holy steps here on planet Earth.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. What is it like to be a human on Earth these days? I've been waking up in the last couple of years very often thinking, this is what I came here for. This is what I've been wondering my whole life, why I've been cultivating these practices. And even though it is really, it is a wild time right now, there's a lot that is changing, and it can be a beautiful time as well if we use it the right way, if we really, as a collective, dive into the sacredness within, and therefore being on this planet. And there's a lot happening. We're really uprooting a lot of systems that aren't working. We see that outside of ourselves, and we see that within ourselves. And I'm really here to talk about, ritual and really looking inwards and how we can make that change. Because I feel like a lot of what I'm seeing on social media or anywhere is a lot of blaming and a lot of this should be different. But are we really looking inward and making the change within? Because that's what I've been learning in my own life, is if something's not going right in my life, where inside of me do I participate in this unhealthy pattern? So
it's interesting, because I think there's like two sides to the patterns. I teach regenerative philosophy, and I'm an herbalist, and so it's all about pattern recognition and everything from ecological systems to body systems to mental spiritual process, and I think I'm in this other mentorship group right now with women, and what I was teaching about was patterns. And it's interesting to think about, we go so often to like our bad patterns, and like we try to cultivate good patterns in ourselves. And it's interesting to also recognize the things that we are doing right, and where we are, like when we made it, we're like, oh, finally like shifted into that pattern, or I've actually been doing this pattern and it's really helpful for me. And so would you mind sharing a little bit about your own daily patterns that really support you in your process?
Yeah, I think I love that you bring up recognizing the good patterns, because I've lived a big part of my life in judgment of not having energy or not being perfect or not doing it the right way. And through diving deep and studying and creating different patterns, I've come to realize that, this morning I woke up and I didn't have a lot of energy. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be on this call and I'm not feeling it. And it's like, well, what do I have in my toolbox, right? To do what I can do. And actually, it's okay to show up tired. Like the pattern that is so ingrained in us women to always have to be everything and be it all. And what I did this morning was I went into my meditation and then I went into a pleasure practice to feel myself and to love on myself. And I was like, oh, I actually am excited about having this conversation, and everything's perfect. Everything is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you're touching into is like our biorhythms, and how there's a variety of biorhythms. I mean, the big one is just the rising and setting of the sun, and then there's the seasonal biorhythm, and then there's the lunar biorhythm, and then there's like the internal biorhythm of like our hormones and our age process and our like our mental emotional state and what we're dealing with, because we're constantly responding to the world, which adjusts the rhythm within us, and so much of extraction and exploitive capitalism puts us into a very fixed rhythm. And that fixed rhythm, it starts from childhood of having to get up at a certain hour to catch the bus to go be in like the specific rhythm of the day at school, to then come home. And it does create a pattern that can be comfortable in its discomfort, but it's predictable for people. And so there is a level of comfort in that. But what we realize is that it doesn't actually work so well for us, in that like, okay, we're forced into a specific rhythm of like, now I got to get up and go to work and, all of these things. And as a wellness practitioner working as an herbalist for a few decades now, like, I noticed the biggest thing that people ask me is like, how can I sleep better and how can I have more energy? And to me, it's like the first obvious question is, well, like you're not listening to what your body actually needs, but then we actually have to also adjust and transition based on what's happening around us, And so like acknowledging for yourself, like I'm tired and so I'm not feeling it. And it's like, it's okay. Like to have that, like, you don't always have to be perky and perfect and like ready for life all the time. It's like that whole idea of this like Superman, Superwoman always showing up. It's like such a imprint from the capitalistic paradigm that we've all been born into, And so how have you found yourself able to, throughout your practice, throughout your years and experience and working with other people to help people break, and yourself, to start to snap out of that imprint that we were faced with since childhood, since birth?
Yeah, for me, it started becoming really loud when I became a mom 10 years ago. And it was just, I was so uncomfortable in my body that I needed to start looking at what was going on. Mm-hmm. And I started diving in, and a summary is to really feel in our bodies. What is it telling us? And learning to deeply listening to the inner child that might be at play, listening to needing to connect to the inner mother that we all need to, hug sometimes. It's really a connection to coming back to the self and a deep listening. And when we connect to ourselves, we connect to nature. And you being an herbalist, I was very disconnected from nature. And when I connected to myself and I started looking outside of me and I saw nature, it's the same. It's like cycles. And like the rose, like when she's wilted and she dies, she's still beautiful. But without that, there's not a new bloom coming. Mm-hmm. And it's like in my business, as I was talking to, with my clients, I talk about this all the time. It's like at the end of the year, we're in such a rush, and we have to make our numbers in winter time, or January 1st, even. We just had it. Everybody's like, oh, January 1st, I have to start producing. I have to. But we're still in winter time in most of the, people that I interact with. It's okay to not be there yet. Actually, your business is going to thrive better if you rest now and you replenish your body and you really sit with what's coming up in your cocoon. Which emotions is there loneliness that is coming up that you're sitting with, and really feeling it all, so you can then come out in the spring and really see and blossom towards summer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in your description of what you wanted to share today, I really liked it because you're mentioning, merging pleasure and purpose, and I really like that because I feel like sometimes when we get into our concept of our purpose, it can feel draining, or it can, especially for people who might walk an activist's path, and not really knowing how to, bring deep pleasure and learn how to regenerate and replenish themselves, as we're walking our path of purpose, especially in the modern situation right now, which is extra heavy and for many reasons, and I'm just curious if you can share a little bit about that and bringing pleasure into your purpose and making sure that they're aligned. And what does that even mean? Because pleasure, I think, is a very broad, and purpose is very broad too. Can you get into that for us a bit?
Yeah. Well, I'm being called to share with pleasure a lot of my reprogramming that I've had to do. I grew up in the Catholic Church. And I grew up with the feeling around my body and being in pleasure that it was wrong, mm-hmm. and that I couldn't really show it, and that I had to suppress it and just be stoic and just function. And a woman that was in pleasure and that just like kind of erupts just with her energy. It's not even sexual, that was wrong. And on my journey, I have learned through these practices that actually, when I get deep into feeling into the collective or feeling into what's going on in the world, it can become very heavy. And it is the pleasure of like, wow, there is still the source of energy that we can tap into, and we can move it through our bodies. And from that place, actually alchemize whatever's here, whatever it is that we're feeling. But a lot of us or a lot of women that I work with don't even dare to go there because it's so taboo, and you don't even have to be religious or anything. It's just so ingrained in our society. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of practice? You mentioned your practices. Can you share a little bit about those?
Yeah. Well, one that I love doing is being on my bed and just feeling into the heaviness. Like if there is a heaviness or if I'm in a lot of gratitude, it can be one or the other. And really being with that and allowing it to come into my body instead of not wanting to feel so grateful because it might be too much, or not wanting to feel heavy, but really allowing it to be, and then to just let my body move in the way it wants to move, and just not think, but just allow it. Can, like, it looks, very expressive. But what happens is when I do that, it just like I give my body the freedom to express it and to feel whatever it may be. Like texture, and you start feeling yourself, you feel yourself. And then it's kind of like a return to, like what you said, God, the divine spirit, whatever you call it. And so for everyone who's listening, like really lay on your bed and feel yourself. And if you want to go into a deeper pleasure practice, go ahead. But pleasure doesn't always have to go to whatever we always think that it is. It can just be a 5-minute laying on your bed and acting like an octopus.
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit about just the sensuous, right? And how the sensuous isn't just in pleasure practice or in touch. Like as an herbalist, for example, we engage, and through spiritual ecology, we teach this a lot about engaging the sensuous, and interacting with the sensuous is even the thing like of the senses and smelling and really taking something into your body, and the way that you eat your food, and observing like texture and flavor, and then like feeling things like moving, it's like the transference of the vital force of our food, or like the pleasure even of color, for people out there who are really sensitive to color, or, artistic inclinations, these types of things. It's like color really invokes so much emotion and can take us deep into like feelings of reverence or disgust, or there's a lot that comes from that. Like I think about even looking at like artificial color and how it makes me feel like deep into my body, and that like aversion that I have to it versus when I see the color of a fresh fruit, or like your glow in your skin, like those types of things. And so I think that, pleasure has so many levels, and it's really rooted in the senses, and I hear you like in your bed, I could feel it, like the feeling of my sheets, and when you're in your bed and you're all soft and and it just feels so blissful. So like what kinds of things do you help to cultivate with your clients, to help them to learn, like what are some of the, other techniques that you offer to people?
Yeah, I love what you were saying about the senses, because that's where we come back to life as a ceremony, right? Like if you can eat your food with pleasure and really put intention into everything. That is a big one that I love to work with my clients is, what is your intention? I call it Jedi training. So if we know that we are this powerful being in a very humbled way, we're very powerful beings, and we are constantly emitting energy, then can we put more and more intention into the words that we speak? And minds, can we become more aware? And if there's, coming back to the patterns, right? If there's patterns that you notice that aren't serving you anymore, where do they come from? And that's where I love the subconscious mind and hypnotic techniques and the plants and all, is how they help us and they teach us to go into those patterns and see, why are we holding on to them? Like, yes, they came from maybe a parent or a trauma, but what is it, and why are they still serving us, and why are we holding on to them? So I was talking to someone yesterday about victimhood, and how I've had to look in my life on where I was the victim still in my story. Where are we the victim of our reality? And what do we like about that? And that can then come back to pleasure. Do we really get pleasure from being a certain pattern, that it's even that pattern isn't serving us, but there's some sort of pleasure subconsciously that we get from it. So yeah, it's like diving deep into who we are and just looking at everything, not judging it, but become friends with all these sides of us.
Yeah, it touches into like the identity of something, right? And that identity is a pattern which is comfortable, it's predictable. And that's why, like things with, for example, like climate catastrophes happening, they're unpredictable right now, where we used to feel like we could, know what a season was going to be like based on our bioregion that we lived in, and that predictability leads to a feeling of safety, right? And so I think even when the pattern's harmful to us, it's still comfortable and safe. And whether it's the pattern of, the thought processes or the relating that we're doing or the foods that we're like habitually eating, it's like to break that apart, we start to see it as something of shift and change, like reconstructing the pattern actually has to go through chaos first. And this is the nature of something like a hurricane or the fire, where it's like, they are patterns actually in nature. It's the spiral, it's the outback jet of the gases of the fire. And it's like when these patterns come in, they intentionally are there to cause chaos. And the chaos allows for reordering and new patterning to form. And that's the hardest part for people, is to allow themselves to go through chaos. And, I think that's a deep part when you use the word alchemize. That's what's happening there, as things are being deconstructed and broken down to their essential components. And what do we do with that after,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's allowing us to go into the pain and completely tearing up the puzzle and looking at it and be like, wow, it's going to be a new one.
Yeah.
Be completely different, but yet the same.
Mm-hmm. And then we have that beautiful opportunity of taking pleasure in reimagining ourselves, right? Because it comes from there first. It's the imagination of what could be, what is possible in the world.
Yeah, and it's in those moments that the best poems are written and the most beautiful art is made, and people find their medicine. What is it really that your body's calling to go do now, to be freed from what's heavy? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where can people find your work? Like, what do you have to share that's coming up for you now that could be helpful for those watching, listening?
Yeah, I took an 8-week break from social media and everything, and I just moved to Costa Rica actually from LA. Just skipped the flyers by a couple days. And I'm here. I want to do retreats here. I will come up with another online course soon, but people can follow me on Instagram. I am back on there, and I'll be sharing more of what I have to share with the world on there. But yeah, isabellegold.co is a good, it's my website. People can book one-on-one sessions there.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you everyone who's watching. We're coming to time. We're keeping our talk short to pay attention to the attention spans of humankind right now. And so I just want to thank you so much, Isabelle, for coming with us today and being present with She Leads, even in your biorhythm of feeling well. We honor you for just showing up and taking the time and acknowledging your process here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who watches these talks. Again, this is Isabelle Gold and Sarah Wu. We're here with Anima Viva and She Leads. And please watch us live every Wednesday and Friday. And then, of course, you can find the recordings to this on all the platforms. So thank you so much, and we will see you again.